This week on Route 2020, a country trying to find itself.
And this is our moment right now.
From the streets fighting for change.
People are saying enough is enough.
To some of the youngest in our country fighting to understand race in America.
It's kind of scary because we're always referred to as criminals and thugs.
Plus,
ultimately, we've got to trust people to make good decisions.
The aftermath of a global pandemic where politics are now taking over.
We need to be wearing masks in public.
COVID is a fraud. It is a scamdemic.
Defining moments for a country racing toward a presidential election.
This is what democracy looks like. Our house! Our house!
Hi everyone, from the nation's capital, I'm Blair Miller. Here on Route 2020, we bring you the most important issues as we get closer to Election Day. The political landscape has dramatically changed, and right now we know this country is facing some big issues. In a matter of months, we've gone from fighting a pandemic, being isolated at home, to now asking questions about police brutality and what will change with race relations. Today we're looking at how both are impacting our country and the race for the White House. Police reform has quickly become a major issue here in Washington and in cities all across the country. That's where we begin this week at our first stop. With powerful images from state to state, protesters demand change among the ranks of the thin blue line. In Washington, lawmakers from both parties agree now is the time to address the tension in the country over police misconduct.
All communities are laser focused on a response from Washington.
Now is the moment for real, lasting, comprehensive change.
But what will that change look like? While lawmakers debate separate plans, police officers keep suiting up for their jobs.
Part of that whole de-escalation thing is when you arrive on scene is to look and listen. Most important skill or your tool is your brain and your communication skills.
Protesters are calling on community leaders to hold officers more accountable and to fund police departments in hopes that those funds are redirected to other programs.
People are saying enough is enough. Let's make these changes, and hopefully their legislator will hear them and make the changes immediately.
But as calls to defund and reform policing grow, many officers say they feel abandoned. From New York to Florida, officers are already stepping down from specialized units.
I think you're going to start seeing officers trying to find another place to go.
As America wrestles with that, the coronavirus remains a serious health issue. In some parts of the country, the numbers are spiking. But it's the political landscape that's starting to see a great divide when it comes to dealing with the pandemic. As the presidential campaigns wind back up, lots of questions surround how to get in front of voters. President Trump made his return in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in front of a crowd of thousands, few of them wearing masks. But across the country, as many people start to venture out, gathering in groups, top infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci says Americans need to stay vigilant.
There's no doubt that wearing masks protects you and gets you to be protected.
But the question of wearing a mask has become political. From President Trump repeatedly refusing to wear one in public, to protesters gathering outside state capitals, many of them without their faces covered. They're rallying to expedite the reopening process. Ohio's governor says this should not be a debate.
This mask is a symbol of freedom. It's a symbol of freedom because it's going to, if we wear these, if we get 75 to 80% of the people who are out in public who are wearing this mask, we are going to see these numbers get better.
But in the shadows of the pandemic, some businesses are now failing.
We had a lot of dreams here.
Some neighborhood businesses, like this bookstore in Michigan, haven't been able to get government funding and now facing the reality that they can't pay the bills.
COVID came in and it changed the landscape. We wanted very much to be a community place where people could come, bring their kids, play games, open mic nights, game nights.
Unemployment is now at 13% in this country, and even as businesses start to reopen, the hiring isn't exactly bouncing back.
Normally, we would be hiring and I'd be bringing on new faces, but now I'm just working with the people that I have.
Up next on Route 2020.
Our exclusive investigation looks into police practices across the country. I spent weeks talking to hundreds of police chiefs and sheriffs about their departments, what we found, and the challenges these agencies face coming up.
Then later,
how much of this are you guys actually seeing?
A frank conversation with a group of kids with their own thoughts on race in America.
Just because people are afraid of what's different, that causes a lot of violence and harm to people that don't deserve it.
A Route 2020 investigation into policing practices found most law enforcement agencies we reviewed have military equipment from the federal government, and about a third use body cameras. Our Samantha Manning spent weeks looking into this.
I've spent the last few weeks talking to hundreds of police chiefs, sheriffs, and other law enforcement officials all over the country. Many of them say limited local funding plays a role in their access to programs and equipment. A movement sparked by brutality.
I can breathe. We have awakened the conscience of our nation.
Now a nationwide call for police reform. There isn't currently a national database when it comes to many police practices. So we created our own. Samantha Manning calling. We contacted law enforcement agencies here and in areas across the country where we have sister stations, more than 400 in total. We found around 38% of law enforcement agencies use body cameras. Less than 10% have citizen review boards to review cases involving use of force. And around half use surplus military equipment from the federal government.
The military is already effectively in cities and towns around the country. That's what this analysis shows me.
We brought our findings to the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law.
I would think that there would have been more jurisdictions that had access to body-worn cameras.
Many of the chiefs and sheriffs I spoke with say it comes down to money. They can't afford the cost of body cameras or the video storage. They say that limited funding also plays a role in the use of surplus military equipment through a program with the Pentagon. I spoke with Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo, the president of the Major Cities Chiefs Association.
We have to remove the emotion from a lot of these conversations.
Records from our investigation show dozens of agencies have armored vehicles. In some cases across the country, they've been used to help local police respond to recent protests. Our departments say they use them in flooding and other weather events. What do you say to people who are concerned about local law enforcement agencies becoming militarized?
Well, I would say that they need to go no further than Dayton, Ohio. Some deranged killer went on a shooting spree. It was a Dayton police officer with a military assault style rifle that we call patrol rifles that was able to take that man down.
I'm not going to say all out, get rid of it, but the fact that there's so much of it on the streets and in different police departments around the country is concerning.
And while only a few of the agencies we spoke with use citizen review boards to review cases involving use of force, many say they have advisory committees. Those are meant to give community input on police practices. In Washington, D.C., I'm Samantha Manning.
In many of our homes, we're talking about race and what it means in our lives, in our neighborhoods, and in our country. As lawmakers try to sort it out, I recently met a group of kids from across the country, and we talked about race. It was a frank conversation, as they told me how it's impacting them.
So as we see what's happening in this country with people protesting and signs being put up, how much of this are you guys actually seeing? Who wants to go first?
We have a creek by our park, and I've been seeing a lot of Black Lives Matter signs around there.
And what do you think about that, Dominic?
I think that people are just trying to spread the message around.
How many of you have been watching this stuff closely, and what has it meant to you to see some of this?
I think it's scary, but it's also for a good cause. And Black lives do matter.
It means a lot to me because we're taking a next step in our culture and how people treat us.
It's scary because I know that a lot of people are Black and my own dad is Black, and it's just scary to think about happening to one of my family members.
I feel nervous.
What are you nervous about?
Like a lot of stuff could happen during this riot and everybody breaking out.
Do you worry about something happening to you or someone you know or love?
Yeah, somebody I know.
What do you think about race in this country and how people are treated?
I think about it's not really that fair that African American people are just getting put down just because of their skin color.
I think that in general, like a lot of people just are discriminated against always just because of simple things like what they believe in or who they love or the color of their skin, and just because people are afraid of what's different, that causes a lot of violence and harm to people that don't deserve it.
I think it's kind of scary because we're always referred to as criminals and thugs and things like that, but that's not always the point. Like sometimes we could be walking in the street and it's usually Black males. They could be walking in the street and they'll get a gun pulled on them.
So what do you guys think needs to happen in this country?
I think that people have to think more kindly, like, what if this happened to me? Like, just because they're a different skin color doesn't mean they're different.
We should all love equal because we're all humans.
I feel like we should all love each other as equally because we're basically all the same skin. We start off all the same skin color, but we just have more melanin in our skin and our skin tone is darker.
How much of this is being discussed within your own families?
My mom and dad talk about it all the time.
As a family, we kind of talk about, with all of like the looting and the riots that are going on, is it really does it really help? Like, is it better to be more peaceful or to be more violent to achieve what we want?
In my family, I guess it's like an everyday conversation and it goes back and forth from back then to now, and which would be a better idea, like if we have followed what Malcolm X wanted to do instead of what Martin Luther King wanted to do, would it be a difference today?
I think that what we're trying to do is we're trying to fix everything at once. I think we should just do it. If we just do it one at a time, we would get it done faster, maybe.
I really do appreciate you sharing your thoughts. You guys are so smart and so aware of what's going on, and that's so very important, and it will last you for years to come. So thank you all so much for your time here today. It's been a pleasure getting to talk with you and getting to know you all.
Ahead, how people vote this election could look a lot different.
There's a lot of misunderstanding of what the system is and what it isn't.
Mail-in voting getting attention on both sides.
It should be you go to a booth and you proudly display yourself.
Next on Route 2020, we look at how mail-in voting works and if it's a real option this year. Now to the campaign trail, where the candidates are focusing on important swing states and its race relations that could be one of the most important issues.
The words of a president matter, no matter who the president is.
Democrat Joe Biden is trying to contrast himself from President Trump, saying the president isn't giving direction.
We're going to build a future of safety and opportunity for Americans.
The president at recent rallies has said he's the only one who can pull the country out of turmoil. Some analysts believe race relations could be the issue that drives voters to decide who should be president. We've heard so many people ask, what's the new normal? The presidential election is now less than 4 months away, and some wonder if this outbreak will keep some people from voting. There's a fierce debate over this right now, so we decided to look at how mail-in voting is working in some places. Right now across the nation, 5 states allow all elections to be held where people send in their vote by mail. 16 other states allow it in some form, but not for presidential elections. Some members of Congress are pushing for a state requirement allowing no-excuse vote-by-mail e-ballots. The president has made clear that despite the outbreak, it shouldn't be allowed this year, claiming it would lead to organized voting or fraud.
It shouldn't be mail-in voting. It should be you go to a booth and you proudly display yourself. You don't send it in the mail where people pick up all sorts of bad things can happen.
Phil Kiesling used to think the same thing.
I instinctively opposed it to expand voting by mail, which is what we called it then. You know, I was sentimental.
That was 1989 when he was a state lawmaker in Oregon. 2 years later, he became Secretary of State and changed his mind. He helped put in place the state's mail-in voting system, which is now used for every election in Oregon, including for president.
I think that when voters have a chance to try it, they invariably discover they like it.
It's different than absentee voting, where voters have to apply and opt in to get a ballot. With mail-in voting, every voter is automatically mailed a ballot, and they either send it back or drop it off at a special location.
There's a lot of misunderstanding of what the system is and what it isn't.
How about this issue that people have suggested with fraud?
We've probably mailed out over 200 million mailed out ballots. We've had, I think, fewer than 100 cases, all scattered and unorganized, of people violating the law, usually by voting a second time or forging a signature or a vote.
In Oregon, the process has saved the government millions of dollars and increased voter turnout in most elections by 10%. Higher-ups in the Republican Party, like Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, told me they feel like Democrats are rushing to do this.
What I don't like is saying we're going to change our entire voting system with 5 months to go, really, if you count early voting and the time it takes to print a ballot, to force every state to do mail-in voting, something they're not equipped for.
Do you think it's even possible with the timing to get something in place?
Well, I think Democrats are going to try and do that.
There are several bills in Congress to fund mail-in voting, which would cost billions of dollars nationwide. Democrats have also tried to get mail-in voting covered by some of the recent stimulus relief packages. The timing could be key in all this. Election officials tell me that if this is something that's going to happen, it needs to happen now so they can get everything in place, including those ballots, in the mail. When Route 2020 continues, a time of change.
I don't know when it's going to end.
And how it's viewed through the eyes of the men and women tasked with leading our country. Here's what's happening beyond the hill. Route 2020's Justin Gray shows us the election day changes being made in Georgia.
This is about accountability.
Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger unveiling a new statewide fix for November. One of the biggest issues last week was in the operation of Georgia's new voting machines. Technical glitches and confusion led to many of the long waits. The plan for November, have a technician at every precinct.
In this election, nearly every technical issue was resolved in minutes once a tech arrived.
We reported on the problem of voters not receiving their absentee ballots they requested. Now the Secretary of State is developing a statewide web portal to handle all those requests.
This will take work off the counties and eliminate errors and allow voters to know their applications have been received and processed.
Well, Raffensperger says 70% of problems were in Fulton County. Critics are pointing the finger at him.
If you can't do your job, we're asking you immediately, you should resign.
Raffensperger says part of his plan is to work with counties to better train poll workers.
You talk about enhanced training, but you've also talked about how that's a responsibility of the counties. How from your office can you make sure that that training gets done, that we don't have like we had in Fulton where people touch that machine for the first time on election day?
Well, we're going to be developing some metrics on that, additional checklists. The most important thing is, like anything, The longer you do something, the better you get at it.
The Georgia Secretary of State is asking the legislature to give the state election board the authority to intervene when counties are having problems. The Secretary of State also tells us he does not expect to mail every Georgia voter an absentee ballot application for the general election the way they did in the primary. Reporting in Atlanta, I'm Justin Gray for Route 2020.
It's clear there's a lot of frustration in our country right now, a lot of it aimed at Washington and the people sent here to lead our country. So we asked lawmakers, with so many people hurting and questioning our future, how do they see race in America? It's this week's Real Feel.
Anytime that these issues come up, we need to find out why they're there. One of the issues that I would like to see is how can we make it easier for police departments to get rid of bad actors.
So I don't know when it's going to end, but we need to make serious change in our country. And every single one of us has to take some responsibility in authoring that change.
Time is of the essence, and frankly, the momentum in the American households around this country on this issue, not minority communities, but all communities are laser focused on a response from Washington. We should provide them with a blueprint of what it looks like to restore confidence in the most vulnerable areas of this country.
Well, it's not only the buildings in our country that are smoldering, the very soul of our country is on fire. We have a responsibility to pass the laws that root out the racial injustice built into our criminal justice system, our educational system, our healthcare system, our economic system. We need to do that, and we need to do it now.
That last statement, we need to do it now, is something that many people are saying these days. It was 57 years ago, this August, that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had his own words for the country that was trying to find its own way. Here he stood on the National Mall in front of 250,000 people, telling them he had a dream. Imagine today, Dr. King giving that same speech and how people may respond to it. His message, still one that applies today. I'm Blair Miller. Thanks for watching Route 2020.
This is what democracy looks like.